Hello everybody and welcome back to yet another Logan Blackman Show YouTube video. As you can tell by the title, this video will be going over Mock Draft 3.0. I know it's a week delayed. I'm sorry for that. I do apologize greatly. We were following the United States run in the 2025 Nations League, which in hindsight, was that a good idea? Because man, I really wish I didn't spend my time watching that. Obviously, I'm being a little over dramatic there because I love watching the United States play, but it's just so frustrating to see results like that against Panama and Canada and look at the reflection and all that stuff. Make sure to check out the latest video from that down in the description below. And while you're down there, make sure to check out all the different links, the social media accounts, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Make sure to check out the podcast on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also subscribe to the podcast YouTube channel down below. But most importantly, make sure to look at or click the link to the blog post for Mock Draft 3.0. It will be a much more detailed synopsis of this mock draft. And without any further ado, let's just get right into this because I don't want to waste too much time on an intro. I don't want to do a whole long-winded intro thing like we normally do on here. I just want to get right into it. So we're looking at the first overall pick in the draft. It seems pretty much just between two people, and that's Cam Ward and Abdul Carter. I know Brian Callahan the other day said that Cam Ward, Carter, Shedeur Sanders, and Travis Hunter are all elite prospects in this draft, but the Tennessee Titans really, the only two players they've been linked to are Ward and Carter. It would be kind of hilarious if they did end up drafting Shedeur Sanders with the number one overall pick with all this hype surrounding Cam Ward. With this pick, it's very interesting to look at because there's been reports varying throughout the offseason where it's like, at the start of the offseason, they loved Cam Ward. Then it was like, oh, they like Cam Ward, now they love Abdul Carter. And if you're looking at like the previous quote from the GM, that we're not gonna pass on a generational talent. And the closest thing to that in this draft would be either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. I don't know if I would throw those tags on them, but if we're talking about the closest to that, it'd be those two. But the biggest need for the Titans is Cam Ward. And I know I had Abdul Carter going to the Titans first overall in the last mock draft, but in this one, we're going to go back to Cam Ward. This is what I would do at the position. We've talked about the relationship with Will Levis and Brian Callahan, with Will Levis being more of a meme than a quarterback this past season. Cam Ward is far and away, in my opinion, the best quarterback in this draft class from an ad-lib ability, from arm strength ability, from calmness under pressure. Like, he just has everything you look for. Sure, again, we bring this up every single time. He has the odd case of trying to do a little too much, or trying to put the Superman cape on and trying to be Superman, play hero ball. But if that can get coached out of him, you have a very, very good quarterback on your hands. And the second overall pick with the Cleveland Browns, this is another interesting one because this is another thing that's kind of transitioned throughout the course of the offseason. If you went back a couple months, Adam Schefter, one of the two, I can't remember which one, I think it was Adam Schefter, said that the Cleveland Browns would select a quarterback early in the draft. You look at their situation this offseason, you look at what teams have signed quarterbacks and who haven't. The Browns have been relatively quiet on the quarterback front. The only thing they have done to address the position is sign or trade for Kenny Pickett. As of right now, Kenny Pickett's your starter. I highly doubt he's going to be the starter going into the season. And if we're talking about like actual fits for the quarterback in a team and schematics and coach and all that stuff, Shedeur Sanders fits what Kevin Stefanski wants to do. But as recent reports have suggested, the Browns are apparently zeroing in on Abdul Carter. Who knows what's true at this point as we get close to the draft? Like, this whole thing's considered lying season or silly season, whatever you want to call it. And the closer you get to the draft, the more lying starts. Like, the prime example of that is Will Levis. We brought it before. People were talking about right before the draft that he was pretty much a lock to go to Indianapolis Colts at 4th overall, and he didn't end up going to the second pick in the second round. Like, it's kind of just crazy stuff like that. Or CJ Stroud stock dropping significantly after his cognitive test. Like, just dropping significantly. Ends up going 2nd overall to the Texans. Like, the closer you get, the more lies you get told. So Lord knows what the Cleveland Browns are going to do, and signing Myles Garrett to that new extension this offseason would make you think that, oh, maybe they do go after Shedeur Sanders here. Again, the reports recently suggest that Abdul Carter will be the pick, so I can only go off the reports at this point in time, and I'm going to go Carter here with the Browns. And they do have 10 draft picks, which I believe is the second most out of every team in the draft. They do hold the first overall pick in the second round, so maybe we see them possibly trade back into the first round with a team like the Vikings, who only have four draft picks this year, to end up drafting Jackson Dart. If he slips back to the Pittsburgh Steelers, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But the New York Giants, this is a big, interesting team as well, because this is the team that really can shape the entirety of the draft. Let's say, hypothetically, they don't draft Shedeur Sanders, because they did sign Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston this offseason. If they go with Travis Hunter, where Shedeur Sanders goes is a massive question mark. Like, do you look at the team like the Raiders? Yes, I know they traded for Geno Smith this offseason, but what if they want to have that contingency plan? They don't really want Aiden O'Connell to be the backup this season. Or you look at a team like the New York Jets. They signed Justin Fields. They have Tyrod Taylor. Would they want to draft Shedeur Sanders? Would they want him to be their quarterback of the future? The Saints, desperate need of a quarterback. Yes, Derek Carr will be under contract this year, but next year with a new head coach in Kellen Moore, would he want a young developmental quarterback there as well? And then you look at like the Steelers at 21. The Cowboys at 12 could be a dark horse team. There were some reports that the Browns were talking about trading with the Cowboys for Dak Prescott, and that the Cowboys were going to draft Shedeur Sanders, and the Cowboys were going to sign Deion Sanders to be the head coach next year. Like, it was just a big convoluted mess that I guarantee had no truth in it whatsoever. But if they don't draft Shedeur Sanders, the fabric of the draft will be drastically shifted. And there's going to be some people out there that are like, well, they're not going to draft a quarterback now because they signed the aforementioned Wilson and Winston. But I don't really know if that's the case. Per reports, the love affair between the New York Giants and Shedeur Sanders is one of the worst kept secrets in football. Like, we've seen these two teams, these two beings, I guess, flirt with each other pretty much all offseason. Yes, I know they signed 2 NFL veterans, but they signed Jameis Winston to a 2-year deal. They signed Russell Wilson to a 1-year deal. These are not your long-term answers to that position. If you go back to 2018 with the New York Jets, when they had the 6th overall pick, they had Josh McCown and Teddy Bridgewater as their quarterbacks. They still traded up to 3 to draft Sam Darnold. I understand that Teddy Bridgewater was coming off a massive knee injury with the Vikings, so his future is very much in question. Winston and Wilson are not coming off any major injuries, but their stocks are not at their all-time highest. They're just not. So I don't think signing these 2 guys completely rules them out of the fact of drafting a quarterback. I wouldn't be too surprised if they went in the season or the preseason with those 3 guys and then traded one of Wilson or Winston prior to the season started and just rolling with the 2 guys, whether it's Wilson and Shedeur or Shedeur and Winston, whatever. But I am going to still have the Giants drafting Shedeur Sanders here with the 3rd overall pick. And the 4th overall pick, the New England Patriots, I think this depends on what the Giants do. If they take Travis Hunter, let's say, at number 3, then that opens the door to the New England Patriots drafting one of the top offensive tackles in the draft. In my opinion, the Patriots would likely lean towards Will Campbell. Yes, his arm length's not necessarily ideal. I don't think the Patriots have a problem with that. If you're looking like what feels like a Patriot pick, that would be Will Campbell. I know Armin Membo from Missouri would be a very good option here. Has been rising up draft boards like crazy. It wouldn't be shocking if they went for him there. I've seen reports talking about them going with Jalen Walker, the linebacker / edge rusher from Georgia. I think that could be a very reasonable option there as well. But Travis Hunter, if he's here, I think you've got to take him. Like, you look at some of the moves the New England Patriots have made this offseason, like bringing in Milton Williams to shore up the interior defensive line. You've got Harold Landry, we brought it before, coming in from Tennessee. You also brought in Mac Hollins from Buffalo. You just recently signed Stephon Diggs from Houston. Like, the Patriots have been busy. The offensive line hasn't really been that much addressed. I know they signed Morgan Moses from the New York Jets this offseason, I think a 3-year deal. But he's turning 35. I think he is 34, turning 35, or he just turned, I can't remember exactly, but he's getting older. And he missed some time due to injury last year. Is he your, like, bona fide guy there? And he'll start at right tackle, but I still think that leaves a hole open at left tackle. And there are going to be some other options in the draft as well, but would you pass on Campbell or Membo for Travis Hunter? Like, Travis Hunter is one of the 2 best players in the draft next to Abdul Carter. And giving Drake May a receiving tandem of Stephon Diggs and Travis Hunter, that'd be great. From a Patriots fan standpoint, from a neutral fan standpoint, as a Bills fan, I absolutely hate that. That's like worst case scenario here. I'm still like pissed off that Stephon Diggs signed with the Patriots this offseason, but we move. Yeah, I think Travis Hunter, if he's available, will be the pick. I wouldn't be shocked, though, if they did go with one of the tackles here, even if Hunter was available. For right now, I am going to stick with Travis Hunter going here 4th overall. The Jaguars, this is an interesting team because the consensus to this point is Mason Graham from Michigan. And that makes sense. If you're talking about like best overall players in the draft, Mason Graham's probably a top 3 to 4 player in the draft, right behind the likes of Carter and Hunter. Like, he just is. The tape says so. But if you look at what happened at the combine, he only did the bench press at the combine. He came in, I think, 24 pounds underweight. His arm length, I think, was in the 12th percentile or something like that. So there's been some reports of him sliding down the draft board. This is what we brought up before, where it's like, as you get close to the draft, the lying starts picking up because teams are wanting players to fall right into their lap. They don't want to trade up that much, if at all, to draft the players they really want. But I think in this situation, though Mason Graham's been, again, the consensus pick, pretty much chalk pick for the Jaguars at this point in time, I think they're going to draft a tackle. I do. I think they're going to go with Missouri's Armin Membo. here with the 5th overall pick in the draft, because if you look at new GM James Gladstone, talked about the importance of the offensive line and building the team from the front this offseason, like surrounding Trevor Lawrence. He's talking about we haven't seen the best out of Trevor Lawrence, and to see that, we want to start with the offensive line. Like what we started with Jim Harbaugh last year with the LA Chargers, building that offensive line. Yes, I know they have Anton Harrison and Walker Little at tackle, but if you draft Membo, you could slide Anton Harrison back over to left tackle, and you could start Membo at right tackle, or you could play him at guard. Like, I know there's been people that are like, oh my God, we have tackles. Like, we have 2 starting caliber tackles, but they can be upgraded upon. The same thing was said last year with the Chargers as well. Like, we have a starting tackle there. Like, who cares? If you have a chance to upgrade the position, because though they're starting caliber, they're not fantastic. They're not the greatest tackles in the league. If you have a chance to draft one of the top tackles in this draft, and your GM is telling you that we need to get the best out of Trevor Lawrence, and by doing that, we need to rebuild the offensive line and give him structure there and give him more weapons on the outside, then you're going to have to do that. Defensive line would make sense as well. You fill that hole next to Aaron Armstead. There's been some reports of them possibly trading Travon Walker this offseason, which could be very interesting, but I think right now, I'm going to stick with Armin Membo here for the Jacksonville Jaguars at 5. And at number 6, this one again, we talked about chalk picks before, Ashton Jeanty. Like, this one just feels very natural at this point in time. Like, there's been a bunch of reports suggesting that there are a lot of fans within the Raiders organization of Ashton Jeanty. You talked about like Pete Carroll and his history at head coach. You look at his time at USC with Lendell White and Reggie Bush. You look at with the Seahawks with Marshawn Lynch. Like, he knows the importance of establishing a dominating running attack. And his teams that have won championships have been run by the run attack. Like, that's how he's always built these types of teams. The Raiders don't have a good running back at this point in time. They did sign somebody like a week or 2 ago, but I don't remember who it was. But Ashton Jeanty, again, this just feels like a very natural fit here for the Raiders. Mason Graham could be an option here as well to pair next to Christian Wilkins in the middle of the defense. Jeanty's right there. I think the Raiders will take Jeanty there. The Jets at number 7. Mason Graham, another option here for them. I think in a perfect world, they would take Armin Membo. Their biggest need on their team is at right tackle. Again, Morgan Moses left. Tyrone Smith is still a free agent. They have Olu Fashanu at left tackle. They just have that hole at right. And I think Membo would be that guy there. Will Campbell be the option there? I don't know. But ultimately, I'm going to go with Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. Just give him more weapons for the opposite side of the ball. Tyler Conklin went to the Los Angeles Chargers this offseason. Devontae Adams went to the Rams. Like, you're in desperate need for weapons on the opposite side of the ball. And Tyler Warren's just a different being at that tight end position. Just an absolute specimen, actually monster at the position. Sick flow as well. Where's number 44? Because of John Riggins, who used to play for the New York Jets. I just think it's a natural fit here. You look at Aaron Glenn coming from the Detroit Lions where they had Sam Laporta. I just think it's a natural fit. Membo would be my pick ideally if he was available. But I'm going to go with Tyler Warren here to give Justin Fields, or whoever the quarterback is, a big-time target next to Garrett Wilson in the receiving core. I know he's not technically a receiver, he's tight end, but like players on the outside. You get what I'm trying to say. And then number 8, the Jaguars. Mason Graham's an option here as well. But I'm going to go with Jalen Walker, the edge rusher / linebacker from Georgia. This is the pick we had going here last time. North Carolina native, says he has a lot of family in the Carolinas. And it's not just because of the connections with the Carolinas. It's a homegrown kid and all that kind of stuff. It's not just that. This dude can play. We already talked about before with the Patriots talking about him possibly being a pick at number 4. I've seen people talking about him going 5th overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars as well. Like, he could go very, very high in the draft. And I think that positional versatility scares some people, but from the player that you have there, the ability to play both inside linebacker and edge rusher, especially with Shaq Thompson leaving, or them releasing Shaq Thompson, they just need playmakers on defense. The Panthers were pretty much dead last in every defensive category last year. You need playmakers, and out of all the playmakers in this draft, there aren't a lot better than Jalen Walker from Georgia. So I just think we have to look out for that one. Again, Mason Graham's an option, but I'm going to go with Jalen Walker. And the Saints at number 9. This one's interesting, very interesting, because we're not going to mention Mason Graham here. Well, I guess I did, but Kellen Moore's coming in as the head coach. And if you look at the Saints team right now, they're just so devoid of talent. But if you look at Mickey Loomis's reign as GM for the Saints, at least in recent years, like they've built their offensive line through the draft. Like, you look at the likes of Ryan Ramczyk, who's been linked with retiring this offseason. You look at Trevor Penning, Talisi Fuaga, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, Andres Pete. Like, these were guys that Mickey Loomis drafted with early picks in the draft. So there's going to be a lot of connections, a lot of links to Will Campbell from LSU, who's also from Louisiana, with Ramczyk's future in question, with Penning's future even in question. Like, yes, they drafted Fuaga last year, but do they want to double down on the position and get someone like Will Campbell who can, again, flip inside the guard if you really need him to? But I think I'm going to go with the corner here. They traded Marshawn Lattimore this past season to Washington. They still have that hole there. I'm going to go with Jahdae Barron from Texas. This is an interesting one because the past 2 mock drafts, I've had him going to the Green Bay Packers at 23, but at recent times, it's starting to build up steam that Jahdae Barron not only could be a top 20 pick, but a potential top 10 pick. Like, there has to be some sort of link here as well, because you could go like, well, Logan, Will Johnson, by most accounts, would be considered the better cornerback prospect. We've talked about Will Johnson for years in college football while he was at Michigan, but that injury history that he's had recently is not really boosting his stocks all that much. And Jahdae Barron, the Jim Thorpe Award winner from this past season, not as big as Johnson, but can do a lot of different things in the secondary. I think a thing that's important to note here as well is that his secondary coach from Texas is now the secondary coach with the New Orleans Saints. And connections are key in the NFL. So I'm going to go with Jahdae Barron here with the 9th overall pick in the draft, and that leaves Will Campbell for the Chicago Bears at number 10. Yes, I'm aware the Bears have made a lot of moves this offseason on the outside line, bringing in Drew Dahlman from Atlanta, Jonah Jackson from Los Angeles. They also traded for Joe Thuney when a lot of people thought they would sign Trey Smith, the other Kansas City Chiefs guard. They've rebuilt the offensive line. Like, they've got bona fide starters at 4 positions. Braxton Jones, I'm not convinced with. He's coming off an ankle injury. There was a video circulating with him without a boot on or something like that, or he had a boot on, I can't remember, but he's in a contract year as well. I know there's going to be Bears fans that defend Braxton Jones, and understandable, but if you have a chance, like we brought up with the Jaguars before, if you have a chance to potentially upgrade the position, you've got to take it. Ben Johnson has talked about the importance of building the offensive line for Caleb Williams, building a nice security blanket in front of him. He was the most sacked quarterback in the league by a wide margin this past season. So I don't think it's a bad idea to keep doubling down on the offensive line. And like we brought up before about his potential playing guard as well on the inside. Like, Joe Thuney's going to be, 33 in November? And I know he's been ever present throughout his time in the NFL. He's played damn near 10,000 snaps in his career. But I think having Campbell there would be a very good spot at tackle or guard. It doesn't matter which one. I think the Bears still need to address the outside line because I'm still not sold on Braxton Jones. Maybe the Bears fans can tell me down in the comments how good he really is, because I'm not really sold on it. But I'm going to go Campbell here at number 10. And at number 11, this fall will finally stop. We're going to go with Mason Graham for the San Francisco 49ers here. They need help on the defense. Brock Purdy's impending contract extension is looming larger than the 49ers. They made a lot of cuts this offseason. You look at Javon Hargrave, Malik Collins, Leonard Floyd. Like, those are players they got rid of this offseason. Also lost Dre Greenlaw, Hufanga as well at safety. Charvarius Ward left this offseason. Like, the defensive side of the ball has been hit tremendously this offseason. You look at John Lynch's time as general manager of the San Francisco 49ers. Since 2017, he's used first-round picks on defensive linemen for Solomon Thomas, Nick Bosa. You look at Javon Kinlaw, and then Jake Jackson a couple years ago. Yes, he wasn't a first-round draft pick, but they used a top draft pick on him. It was the first draft pick of that year. Yes, it was in the second round, but you still used a valuable pick to secure that defensive line. I thought the cut of Leonard Floyd would bring in Joey Bosa, but he ended up signing with the Bills instead. So that's cool. I'm all for that if he stays healthy, but they're going to need to secure that middle of the defense. Yes, there's going to be links to corners as well. I've seen a lot of people talking about Jahdae Barron from Texas. Will Johnson's another option here, but Mason Graham is just an absolute game wrecker. And if the reports are to be believed about him possibly sliding in the draft, if he falls to the 49ers at 11, that would be not good for any of us out there. That'd be like a Philadelphia Eagles level steal right there, where a player just falls all the way right into their laps at a specific spot in the draft where they should not be able to fall there. And it wouldn't be the first time the Bears have passed on a falling defensive tackle prospect. I know there's different circumstances surrounding Jalen Carter's draft fall and Mason Graham's draft fall. Completely different circumstances. So, and the Bears did make some decent signings on the defensive line this offseason as well. So maybe there's not that much of a need as much as off the line still for a Mason Graham versus Will Campbell. I don't know. But if the 49ers get Mason Graham at 11, that would not be fun. At number 12, the Dallas Cowboys, they need receivers. They got CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Tolbert. I think right now you could consider the team's number 2 option. Brandon Cooks signed back with the Saints this offseason as well. They did sign the likes of Javonte Williams from Denver and Miles Sanders from Carolina. So the running back room is a little bit better than it was last year. Still not great, but they need receivers. And you've got either Matthew Gold from Texas or Teteroa McMillan from Arizona. I'm going to go with McMillan here. I think he'd be a very nice compliment to CeeDee Lamb on the outside. Big-bodied wide receiver compared to the likes of Drake London and Mike Evans, former volleyball player. Like, he's that big-body guy that I think would suit the Cowboys very nicely next to CeeDee Lamb. Matthew Golden would be very nice for, like, the in-state product and stuff like that, staying in Texas and stuff like that. But I think McMillan, you can kind of flip back and forth about who you think's the number one receiver in this class, who's number two, and all that stuff. I think McMillan at this point in time would be the Cowboys pick, but it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they did go with Matthew Golden here. And the Miami Dolphins at 13, we've had Kelvin Banks going here the past two mock drafts, but as we've gotten closer, there are reports about them drafting a safety early in the draft we're getting a lot more steam as the days have gone on. Javon Holland obviously signed with the New York Giants this offseason. Jordan Poyer's left. They brought in Ashton Davis from the New York Jets. They brought in another safety as well. But that need at safety is really big. And there's two top safety prospects in this draft. You got Nick Emanwari from South Carolina, Malachi Starks from Georgia. Two different skill sets there. Malachi Starks more fluid, can drop back into coverage, follows deep routes very well. And Emanwari is just an absolute physical specimen. Compared to Cam Chancellor from the Seattle Seahawks back today, actually coached by the same guy who coached Cam Chancellor while Chancellor was at Virginia Tech. I've toyed back and forth with the idea for each safety here. And again, offered two completely different skill sets, but I ended up going with Emanwari here from South Carolina. The main reason for that is because the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins, Weaver, came from Baltimore with Kyle Hamilton. We've talked about the comparisons to Kyle Hamilton, like the Seahawks drafting their Kyle Hamilton-esque player at 18 in last mock draft. And then you look at Shed, at the assistant defensive backs coach. He played with Cam Chancellor in Seattle as well. So I think there's a couple connections there that could make it look more likely that Emanwari could go here at 13 rather than Starks. You could say either one's better than the other one. I think they're just offer two completely different skill sets here. I'm going to go with Emanwari here at 13. The Colts at 14. Going to go with Colston Loveland. The main goal for the Indianapolis Colts this offseason is to make sure you get the best out of quarterback Anthony Richardson. Yes, it was an insanely frustrating season this past year, but you knew that when you drafted him, there was going to be some lows. Yes, there's going to be some highs, there's going to be some ridiculous throws in there, but there are going to be a lot of lows. He's just extremely raw. You just need to be patient with it. And how patient the Colts are is going to be very interesting and something to watch out for this upcoming season, especially after signing Daniel Jones. But Chris Ballard has talked about wanting to get more production out of the tight end position. And yes, Tyler Warren's off the board, but I don't think Colston Loveland at 14 is that big of a reach. Yes, he's a little bit different stylistically than Tyler Warren, but in regards to a receiver, there's not a lot of better receiving tight ends in this class than Colston Loveland. So if Warren's gone, I think Colston Loveland's the natural fit here at 14 for the Colts. And then at 15, the Atlanta Falcons, I toyed with the idea of Will Johnson. I toyed with the idea of one of the edge rushers, Mike Green, Michael Williams from Georgia. I didn't know this till the other day that the Falcons have never drafted a Georgia player in the first round. Is that true? I didn't hear that until the other day, but I went with Giad Campbell actually at linebacker. He's a do-everything player. Self-proclaimed Swiss Army knife, self-proclaimed do-everything player, can slot in right in the middle of the defense, was recruited as an edge rusher, can play both positions, can, again, do everything you ask for on the defensive side of the ball. And the Falcons just need playmakers on that side. They signed Leonard Floyd this offseason from San Francisco, which I think will boost the passers. He's not like the same Leonard Floyd that we saw a few years ago, but he's still a decent edge rusher. So I don't want to sit here and say like that completely solves the edge rusher spot. It does not in the slightest. But if you look at the Falcons draft history, they're just going to do everything in their power to not draft an edge rusher. Like every single year, it's like, oh, everybody says we need an edge rusher, so I'm not going to take an edge rusher. Like that's just seemingly what happens here. So that's not anything on Giad Campbell. I think Giad Campbell arguably is a better player than the remaining edge rushers here. I think the Falcons could just go best player available here because they just have so many holes on defense. So I'm going to go with Giad Campbell from Alabama here at 15. And at 16, I'm going to have Will Johnson going here. I'm going to have Will Johnson going to the Cardinals. They did make a big move this offseason signing Josh Sweat from Philadelphia. That is a massive boost in their pass rush. And I still think they could go after another pass rusher here. They also brought in Tomlinson as well to secure up the defensive tackle spot, but I still think they could go with a defensive tackle here. You look at a Kenneth Grant here, Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, Derek Harmon. Those are options here as well. I've also seen reports of them wanting to secure up the guard spot as well. Gray Zabel from North Dakota State is an ideal spot here for the Cardinals, but their defense is going to need to improve. Jonathan Gannon is a defensive guy, and he's also a secondary coach. He has a background in being a secondary coach, so I'm going to have them drafting Will Johnson. He's been compared by some to James Bradbury, who had a lot of success with Jonathan Gannon as the defensive coordinator while in Philadelphia. I just think with guys like, you look at Garrett Williams, you look at Sean Murphy Bunting, you look at Max Melton from Rutgers they drafted last year, like, they need that main guy in the secondary. Will Johnson, again, has been sliding down some boards recently. I wouldn't be surprised again if the Falcons took him at 15, but with Jonathan Gannon's background in the secondary, with him wanting to continue to prove the defensive side of the ball, which they've done a decent job at doing that this offseason. I'm not saying it's like world-beating or anything, but it's still a solid upgrade on what they had previously. Will Johnson, if he's here, I think the Cardinals would take him at 16, and the Cincinnati Bengals at 17. This is they've had a pretty crazy offseason. Like, it went from they franchise tagged T. Higgins, he got mad, then they told Trey Hendrickson he could seek a trade, and then they signed not only Jamar Chase to a massive extension, which we all expected, signed T. Higgins to a massive extension. Like, I like the idea of keeping those two together in some capacity, but you've got other needs on this team. Like, your defense is ridiculously bad. The reason you missed the playoffs last year is not because of your offense. You need to get the defense better. And now you're like, well, Trey Hendrickson, is he going to get traded? But then they were like the other day, they said, oh, well, he might come back this year. They might be able to re-sign him. I don't know what the Cincinnati Bengals are doing. All I know is that they need to improve that defensive side of the ball. And whether Trey Hendrickson's gone or not this upcoming season, Sam Hubbard is. He's gone. He retired this offseason. So you need another edge rusher there. And I'm going to take Mike Green from Marshall with this pick. But production galore, led the nation in sacks this past season while at Marshall, blew up the Senior Bowl. He's the next best edge rusher available. Falls right in their lap here. Yes, you could go with somebody like Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant, but re-signing Hill this offseason to keep up the middle of the defense, I think, was a very nice move from them. So I'm going to go with one of the edge rushers here, and I'm going to go with Mike Green. Corner, I think, could be an option as well if Will Johnson's available, but I'm going to stick with Green here. The Seahawks at 18, if he's available, Gray Zabel just seems like the most natural fit here. The Seahawks need help at guard. They do. Laken Tomlinson went to Houston this offseason. They have a massive hole there. Yes, you could look at a wide receiver. Tet McMillan's here, or Matthew Golden could be an option, especially with DK Metcalf getting traded, Tyler Lockett getting cut. Sure, they brought in Cooper Kupp this offseason, but I'm intrigued to see how they fit Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp in the same team, as they both primarily line up in the slot. So that's going to be something to watch out for. But Mike McDonald's bread and butter, or not bread and butter, but what he wants to do on offense is establish the run. The Seahawks last year were pretty much one-dimensional because they passed the ball a shit ton and couldn't really establish the run because the offensive line had got no pushback. They could not establish a fierce front on the offensive line. A lot of that went down to injuries as well. Mike McDonald wants to improve that run game. He wants to. It's imperative for how the Seahawks run this season that the run game improves. The pass game's going to be whatever. The Sam Darnold signing after trading Geno Smith's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how he does out there. But the run game needs to improve. It has to. And Gray Zabel, if he's there, we talk about the Cardinals possibly taking him at 16. I know the Seahawks would move right there, slot in, replace Laken Tomlinson, the offensive line, and yeah, just move on from there. The Buccaneers at 19. This one is like, oh, Giad Campbell has to go here. Like, that's the most that feels like the most natural pick here is Giad Campbell. But with him going to Atlanta at 15, the Buccaneers aren't going to take a linebacker here. It's just not. So you got to look at other options here. Edge rusher, Donovan Ezeraku, I think would be a very reasonable option here. They did sign Hassan Reddick, who prior to last year put up some ridiculous numbers. Consistent, I think, 4 straight seasons of 11 or more sacks in the NFL. Before he had that weird trade holdout thing with the Jets, he had 1 sack last year, started 2 games. So maybe there's still that player in there that we saw in Philadelphia, but it's going to be interesting to watch how they did sign Joe Shoyinka. They re-signed him. They re-signed Nelson as well. But I do think there's a chance where they go with an edge rush here. I think Ezeraku would be that guy. But you also got rid of Jordan Whitehead. You have Antoine Winfield at 1 safety spot. Your free safety spot's a little bit of a concern at this point in time. So corner, I think, could also be an option here. But I think regardless, they're going to target the defense. And I'm going to go with Malachi Starks. We talked about this before with Nick Imanwori, where they're just 2 completely different skill sets. Imanwori is this big physical specimen. Malachi Starks is fluid, quick turning, can follow routes, track routes really well, versatile as well, can play nickel, can play safety. Like, he's a guy that I'm sure Todd Bowles would love to have on his defense and drastically upgrade the safety position because, again, Whitehead's gone, so you need someone in there. Starks could be that guy to pair next to Antoine Winfield for the future. And then the Denver Broncos at 20. Talk about Javonte Williams going to the Dallas Cowboys. They signed Evan Ingram, which I think before it could have been like, oh, Colston Loveland can be a realistic option here, but Evan Ingram, I think, alleviates that need for a tight end at this point in time. I still think they might draft one later in the draft, but they have a hole at running back. And with Javonte Williams leaving, entering another North Carolina guy in Omari Hampton. This one feels like, again, a very natural fit here. It just feels natural. Like, he had a very good combine showing. He's Mr. Consistent well at North Carolina as well. He could be that bell cow for the New Orleans for the Denver Broncos with Sean Payton there. Bo Nix, you build on what he did this rookie season, made the playoffs, established more of a running attack there. I think you just open up so many more holes in the secondary for Bo Nix to work with. And I think Omari Hampton just feels like a very natural fit here for the Denver Broncos at 20. The Pittsburgh Steelers at 21. Man, what an interesting offseason this Pittsburgh Steelers have had. Both starting quarterbacks from last year, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, both signed with New Jersey teams, the Giants and Jets. Now they're being linked with Aaron Rodgers. But then there was a report today that was like, well, Aaron Rodgers might sit out the entire 2025 season. So if he does that, this pretty much locks up someone like Jackson Dart to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think there's even a chance that if Aaron Rodgers signs with the Steelers, they still go with him because right now their quarterbacks are Skylar Thompson and Mason Rudolph. Like, you've got to go with the quarterback here if you don't get Aaron Rodgers. But I do think at this point in time, though Jackson Dart's a very realistic option for Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin, one thing that I've noticed with him throughout the past few drafts is that at the Senior Bowl or at these different camps or bowl games and all that stuff, he gravitates toward a position you can kind of like, I think he's targeting that spot. And this year, he's kind of been looking at it and hanging out with the defensive tackle prospects. So I'm going to go with Kenneth Grant, actually, from Michigan at 21. Rather than the quarterback, Casey Hayward's getting older. Larry Ogunjobi signed with the Buffalo Bills this offseason, also has a 6-game suspension, so thank you for that one. But the Steelers have usually had very dominant or very ever-present defensive lines. And Kenneth Grant feels like a guy who could play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He just does. I'm not going to elaborate any further. He just feels like a guy who could play for the Steelers. Like we talked about with Mike Tomlin, and I could be reading way too much in this, gravitating towards the defensive tackles at the Senior Bowl, at the Combine. I think that's an important thing to look out for. So I'm going to go Grant here at 21. The Chargers at 22, going to go with Matthew Golden. It's not a Chargers pick. It's not a Jim Harbaugh-esque pick, but you look at the Chargers' need this offseason. They've talked about wanting to get more weapons around Justin Herbert. That's like a number one priority for them. They got Ladd McConkey in the second round last year, which is an awesome pick. But you look at some of the other options they have. They brought back Mike Williams, so I think is a nice little nice reunion tour there. You also have Quentin Johnston still there. You brought in Tyler Conklin from the New York Jets. But are those guys good enough to be number two options or even potentially supplant, unlikely, but supplant Ladd McConkey there? I don't trust Quentin Johnston as far as I could throw him, and Mike Williams hasn't really done anything since leaving the LA Chargers originally. So I think Matthew Golden fits in perfectly here. Give him that deep threat, give him that versatile option there. Ladd McConkey working in the slot. Matthew Golden be that vertical threat for the Chargers. Remember, ran a 4.28 at the Combine as well. Didn't really need to do that all that much at Texas, but I think it really unlock some things in the Chargers offense if they ended up drafting him here at the 22nd pick, if he's available, because there's a very good chance he might not even be here. So we're going to go with Matthew Golden here. The Packers at 23, corner's a massive need, especially with all the links talking about like Jair Alexander's future being in question and stuff like that. But one thing the Packers have done in the draft is look at traits. They're a very traitsy team, like Trent Baalke-esque in regards to obsession with traits. Like, you look at like Rashawn Gary when he got drafted out of Michigan, he didn't really put up the greatest numbers while playing for the Maize and Blue. And he was a top 12 pick. I think he was the 12th pick in the draft. You look at Lucas Van Ness, who was a backup pretty much well at Iowa. They took him with the 13th overall pick. I'm not saying this is like every single year is going to be like that, but they seem to be one of those teams that looks for traits over everything else rather than statistical value in the draft. And with that being said, if he's available, I think Shamar Stewart just feels like a Green Bay Packers player. He went into the Combine at 267 pounds, plays around 290, 280, somewhere around there. Does not have production. And in the slightest, throughout 3 years at Texas A&M, I think he had 2 to 4 sacks throughout his time there, but he's an absolute physical specimen. And with the Packers already having some presence along the edge rusher spots already there, I think they could develop him, hopefully develop him. If they get him developed, and rightly so, you could have one of the scariest edge rushers potential-wise in the league. It's just a matter if you can get to that. And at this point in time, with Rashawn Gary being the prime example of that, Packers have done a good job at developing those types of players. So I think if he's available, I think Shamar Stewart's a very natural very Packers pick here at 23. But again, could be long gone by this point as well. The Minnesota Vikings at 24. Safety was an option here originally because Nick Imawari could be an option. Malachi Starks, two options. Cam Bynum obviously went to the Indianapolis Colts this offseason for a big deal. They were able to bring back Harrison Smith, which I think is a big deal for them. But he's going to be, I believe, 36 or 37 years old after this season, so that's not necessarily the most ideal, and he's only on a one-year deal. But if you listen to Kwesi talk about the safety position and talk about the wariness of the safety position in the first round, how it's the hardest position to scout, because one of the biggest, question marks in recent draft history is when they traded back with the Detroit Lions, who used that pick to select Jameson Williams. They could have drafted Kyle Hamilton. Instead, they traded back and took Lewis Seen with the last pick in the first round, and Lewis Seen has done little to nothing except bounce around practice squads throughout this time in the NFL. So I don't know if safety's really that big of an option for the Vikings at this point. Second round, third round, or I guess I don't even know when their next pick is. Again, they only have 4 picks in the draft. So maybe they address it in another spot there, but corner is a big need. Yes, they did re-sign Byron Murphy, which I think is a nice move for them, but they still need a corner. I'm going to go with Maxwell Hairston here from Kentucky. We talked about the 40-yard dash that he had at a very good combine as well. Not the biggest, most physically demanding corner out there, but I think he could fit what Brian Flores wants to do on defense. I think he is that next best corner after the Johnsons and the Barons in this draft class. And then the Texans at 25, Kelvin Banks. Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas is a little bit further down the board than what I originally anticipated him being. Because again, we've had him going to the Dolphins the past 2 mock drafts up to this point, but the Texans still need help in the offensive line. They've completely reshaped their O-line. They traded Laramie Tunsil to the Washington Commanders. They traded former first-round pick Kenyon Green as well to Philadelphia, and they brought in Laken Tomlinson like we brought up before, but they still need some more piece on the offensive line. They brought in another tackle as well. Who did they bring in? I can't remember for the life of me who they brought. Cam Robinson, I think, is who they brought in this offseason as well. Regardless of who they brought in, they still need to address that offensive line unit because C.J. Stroud is the second most sacked quarterback in the league. And you could go well, Logan, they need receivers as well because Stephon Diggs, like you brought up before, is going to New England. Tank Dell will probably be out the entirety of this season. But the reason they lost that game to Kansas City Chiefs was not because of lack of talent on the outside. Is because C.J. Stroud got sacked 8 times. You need to improve that. And like I brought up with the Bears, it doesn't matter how many people you bring in, it's never a bad idea to keep investing in the offensive line, especially if your quarterback's getting hit as much as he has. And Kelvin Banks, people have talked about him potentially switching the inside as well. Very athletic tackle, was a 3-year starter at Texas, was a captain. He feels like a guy like Nick Caserio would target with the first-round selection if he was available. I think he's would massively improve Houston's offensive line and keep C.J. Stroud upright for the foreseeable future. Because I guess it was like a culture shift in Houston along the O-line. And again, a captain, 3-year starter at Texas. You can't really get much better of a culture shift than that at this point. 26, this is a Jackson Dart spot. And with the Vikings at 24, I'd like to bring this up about, we talk about the Browns having a bunch of picks, the Giants potentially being a team that could trade up if they don't draft Shedeur Sanders. That spot could be a spot to trade up, especially to jump a team like the Rams, who Matt Stafford's restructured, re-signed and all that stuff, but he's 37. He's not getting any younger. Sean McVay at some point is going to want to get his young guy in there. Whether that be Jackson Dart, because he did go to USC. Some people forget that he was at USC before transferring down to Ole Miss when Caleb Williams went up from Oklahoma. As much of an option as that is, the Rams have kind of just targeted the defensive side of the ball with their draft picks. You look at some of the successes that they've had, especially looking at last year. You look at Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, both from Florida State last year. I think those guys, that's the kind of the strategy that they are implementing in LA. It's kind of similar to what the Chiefs have done. If you look at what the Chiefs have done in recent years, they have targeted defensive players with early picks. Most of their starters, barring 2 from this past season, were all drafted by them. I think that's a similar strategy that the Rams are trying to implement, and I think someone like Trey Amos from Ole Miss at corner could be a guy there. Yes, they re-signed Witherspoon this offseason, but the secondary is one of their bigger problem areas of the team. Amos is a bigger corner, 6'1", a little bit bigger than that of Maxwell Hairston. Very fluid corner. He doesn't necessarily have the greatest burst in the world, but he's got great instincts. He made 13 pass breakups this past season. Yes, he's bounced around from college to college. He was at Louisiana, I think Alabama, then before going to Ole Miss. But this dude has the makings of a first-round draft pick. And as we get closer, it's okay, there's going to be more corners going to the first round than what we probably initially thought. And I think the Rams, if they don't go with Dart here, I think that Amos or Hairston, if he's available, would be the pick here for the Rams at 26. And the Ravens at 27, another team to kind of look out for and what they could do. Because remember, they re-signed Ronnie Stanley this offseason, but the dude's always hurt. He's always hurt. Pat McCarry also went down to sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars this offseason. The offensive line's going to need some addressing at some point. I could see someone like Tyler Booker from Alabama being an option here, especially with his history and being that road grader in the run game, which some of the Baltimore Ravens obviously want to do more than anything. Safety's an option as well. They've talked about that before, wanting to free up Kyle Hamilton. Malachi Stark's been the pick here for the last 2 mock drafts. But one thing the Ravens have done, like we brought up with the Pittsburgh Steelers before, they've seemingly always had a presence along the defensive line. With Pierce retiring this offseason, I think the Ravens could do a lot worse than addressing the defensive tackle spot here. So I'm going to go with Derek Harmon from Oregon, who I've seen some people talk about is just a natural AFC North player. And the secondary, yes, could need a boost as well. You could get another corner with Stevens leaving this offseason. But if Derek Harmon's here and the Ravens wanting to reestablish that defensive line, I think they could do a lot worse than Derek Harmon here at 27. The Lions at 28, I'm going to go with Tyler Booker from Alabama. This is what we talked about last time, like the familiarity of drafting players from the same school. Like, I'm not sitting here and saying like it's an exact science or anything, but the Detroit Lions and Brad Holmes have done a lot of work with the University of Alabama. You look at Terrion Arnold last year, Jamison Williams, Brian Branch, Jahmyr Gibbs. They've done a lot of early work with the Alabama Crimson Tide in the first round of the draft. We had Jihad Campbell going here last time. Yes, linebacker's not the biggest need, but when have the Lions ever done what everybody thought they were going to do in the draft? And Tyler Booker would fill an immediate hole in the offensive line. Kevin Zeitler went down to Tennessee this offseason, and the Lions, they want to be physical at the line of scrimmage. I know they've got a lot of holes in the defensive side of the ball. They battled a lot of injuries last year. You could look at someone like Donovan Ezeraku here, James Pierce from Tennessee, Michael Williams from Georgia still available here. You could look at one of the defensive tackle prospects as well. Like, there's a lot of options the Lions could do here, but I think it's getting someone to replace Zeitler on that offensive line, and being that Alabama connection as well with Tyler Booker could be the move for the Lions here at 28. At 29, the Commanders, Michael Williams. This one might seem a little bit harsh that he falls this far in the draft, but sometimes it's how the board works out. Michael Williams has the talent of a top 10 player. Played most of last season hurt, didn't test at the combine or anything. He's got the absolute physical tools you look for in an edge rusher in the NFL, but we just don't have the production. So it's just a matter of, do you care about the production over the athletic traits and the ceiling, or do you put the traits and ceiling over that stuff? Like, it depends on how you want to look at it. And in this draft class, are there a lot of teams early on that could use an edge rusher? Sure. But are there other needs on those teams that they could address with those positions? The Atlanta Falcons being a prime example of that. The Buccaneers being another team in that category. Like, you could have an edge rusher need, but maybe safety's their higher priority. Maybe linebackers are higher priority. Corner. There's other options for these teams out here. If someone falls a little bit further, and that causes someone else to fall further in a draft. And Michael Williams, I think, would be that guy for the Washington Commanders here if he's available. I think this would be a natural spot. When you look at the Commanders' edge rusher spot, like Cleveland Farrell is in line to start this year. Like, you need to get an edge rusher here. Donovan Ezeraku could be a guy here as well. James Pierce from Tennessee, I've brought up before. But Michael Williams, if he's available, I have zero belief that he would fall past spot. Some people might even say, like, you look at Baltimore, you look at Detroit, like other teams that could use edge rushers. Why would they pass on him? I don't know. Sometimes it's just how it works out, but that's the Commanders' game in this draft. And the Buffalo Bills at 30, corner's the big need. Right now, they did just re-sign Christian Benford, which is awesome, but that corner opposite him is a big-time question mark. They re-signed Dane Jackson this offseason, which is fine for depth this season. So, like, they've been linked with Asante Samuel. They can still bring back Rasul Douglas, but even if they bring him back, he's going to be 31 or 32 by the time next season rolls around. So you need to get that young position player in there. But like we brought up with the Vikings, could the Bills be spurred with the first round cornerback position? Like, you look at Kyrie Elam, was drafted the same exact year as Christian Benford, but Benford beat him out and started week 1 against the Rams that season. And they just traded Kyrie Elam to the Dallas Cowboys this offseason. So could they be spurred by that? I don't know. I think if someone like Trey Amos is available, I think Trey Amos would be the guy that the Bills would target in regards to the cornerbacks. But one position I think the Bills will target, if not corner, is the defensive line. The D-line was not good at all this past year. Had a few moments where it was like, oh, Ed Oliver will burst through, but then Ed Oliver would go very quiet Just randomly. It was like right after he signed the contract, he had the great year last year, and just went completely quiet. They need more depth on the defensive line. Yes, they signed Michael Hoyt from the Rams. They signed Larry Ogunjobi. Both those guys are down to two separate 6-game suspensions. They also brought in Joey Bosa this offseason, which I think is a nice risk-free deal, a 1-year contract, I think $12 million or something like that. But the Bills do a lot of rotation on the defensive line, whether that's in the middle or on the outside of the edge rusher position. I think the guy that they've been linked to the most is Landon Jackson from Arkansas. Big ass dude. 6'6", 270, 280 pounds. Obviously famous from that clip of him as a high schooler where he's just smacking the pads like this. The combine, he blew it up. He absolutely blew up the combine. He was at LSU, I believe, before transferring to Arkansas. He could provide that Bills that athletic, big, versatile player on the defensive line. Could play as a 3-tech if need be. Could play on the outside as a defensive end. He feels like a Buffalo Bills player. From that size, they go after more, I don't want to say they go after more traitsy players, but they do have somewhat of a history of getting the long, big defensive linemen or long, big players along the lines, whether that's off the line or defensive line. But I think Landon Jackson, if the top corners are gone, like Trey Amos, I think Landon Jackson would be the pick here. I wouldn't be surprised they went with someone like if Derek Harmon was available or Kenneth Grant. But I just don't see a reality where they could take those two guys unless they trade up, especially Kenneth Grant. I just don't really see that at this point in time. So time will tell, but I'm going to go with Landon Jackson at number 30. 31, the Kansas City Chiefs. I know they've made some moves this offseason around the offensive line. They brought in the dude from San Francisco. Joe Tooney's gone. They still need to get an offensive lineman here. They still need to do that because Jawan Taylor, I have zero confidence in him at right tackle. Josh Simmons from Ohio State played right tackle while at San Diego State, played left tackle at Ohio State. If it weren't for an injury that he had against Oregon, he could be talked about as one of the best tackles in this draft. But in this case, in every single mock draft we had, he's fallen right into the Kansas City Chiefs' lap, and they are perfectly content with that. They are perfectly fine with that. So I'm going to go have him going here at number 31, and the Eagles at 32. I'm going to go with Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. Not the biggest dude in the world, about 6'2", but production for days, 16.5 sacks this past season. And like we saw with Nolan Smith before, they could develop him and have him learn. He could be one of the scariest edge rushers in the league. Bend, athleticism, speed. He's got all the traits you're looking for at that spot. I think he could be a perfect guy along that defense. And you lost Josh Sweat. You lost Brandon Graham. Replacing those guys will not be easy, but getting someone like Ezeraku would be a step in the right direction. Obviously, Milton Williams leaving could open the door for a Walter Nolan in there, but I'm going to go with Ezeraku, and that is Mock Draft 3.0. Once again, make sure to check out the description down below for a more in-depth analysis for this mock draft. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did not, I sincerely apologize. I'll try to be better next time. Yeah, make sure again to check out all the different links down the social media. I'll reiterate, I would love you to check out the blog post. That's the most important thing here. Make sure you like the video if you liked it. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll have another video coming out for you next weekend. I've been Logan Blackman. I hope you enjoyed. Again, if you didn't, I sincerely apologize. Try to be better next time. And I will see you guys later. Peace.